All right, a serious situation in Newport over really the last couple of weeks. We started to hear reports of ICE agents on the ground in the Thames Street area, kind of by the brick alley. As it turned out, evidently just one person was targeted in this scenario. However, people reported seeing military uniform style clad agents, federal agents, in the area of downtown Newport. And this quickly, by the way, masked agents, and this quickly spread throughout the community that this was happening. It sparked a lot of fears. We saw a reaction from Newport schools. I've heard from parents who have said, "Hey, look, not only within the community of immigrants, but on a community-wide basis, there's a lot of concern, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety. Newport is built on the backs of immigrants, quite frankly, slavery as well. Let's be honest about it. So this is a major, major situation, just on a psychological level, part of a tactic by the Trump administration to just say, hey, we're here and we're going to infuse our ideals and sort of a policy of fear into all the practices that we undertake. John, you have a great article on the front page of this week's edition of Newport This Week. Give us the latest on the deportation threats that have put the immigrant and other communities on edge.
Well, I think it's all part of sort of a nationwide sense of fear and worry and concern. And it's interesting because I think the atmosphere in the Northeast, particularly southern New England, is different from a lot of other places in the country. Without going into the history of all that. But, my sense of the story of what happened with the arrest of this one person is that it just set off alarms for everybody in the immigrant community, and not just people who might be undocumented. Everybody involved in this story was really cautious about speaking. And I think I think it's a slight exaggeration to say that it's paranoia, because I think the concern and the fear are very real. There's reason to be concerned. But people didn't want to go on the record because they were afraid that even if a story appeared in the news, it would call attention to immigrants in Newport, Middletown, Rhode Island, whatever. And that's actually a little bit scary, that you're in an atmosphere now politically and governmentally where, even though you want to protect free speech, you're concerned that speaking can get you in trouble. And that's a very bad sign. So it was actually a little, I haven't covered breaking news in a while. So I guess I wasn't in the best shape, and but it was hard to get information. The city government and the police department, who I think were working together to try to come up with a response, took, like almost a week before they officially said anything. And city officials were not too eager to talk. They were being cautious. And then eventually, I think it was like last Tuesday or Wednesday, that the police department posted what they refer to as a general order, which basically, was their admission that they have to follow the law. So yeah, it was interesting to cover the story, even though I didn't get a lot of information from anybody.
Right.
So yeah.
What's been the response from restaurant owners and other hospitality industry employers that, frankly, their operations are dependent on immigrant work.
Well, that's a really good question, and I think even they are being really cautious about talking about anything. I think that they're worried that at some point their establishment is going to be targeted because there might be some folks working in the kitchen or something who are undocumented and or might have um, some kind of criminal background. One of the people I spoke to who works with immigrants pointed something out to me that was really interesting because apparently a lot of the arrests that have resulted in criminal charges had to do with DUI, driving while intoxicated or under the influence, whatever not rape and murder. And one of the questions I had going in with all of this was, if there are immigrants who have been charged and or convicted of a capital crime, they're in prison. So it's like, and if you want to go into the prisons, which they've done, which ICE has actually done, you go into the prisons and grab people up and deport them. Who's to say that they wouldn't be able to make their way back somehow? But I mean, the whole, all the sort of practical issues around this are all kind of confusing, in terms of what the policy is and what the objective is. But it's part of, like, 2 and now going on 3 weeks, I guess, of what people who are not aligned with Donald Trump would call chaos,
Yes.
with all the executive orders and confusion and yeah, it's all pretty crazy. So
It's a crazy moment. There's no doubt. And I think even having, heard from some folks on WPRO in the afternoons, which is an audience that leans conservative,
yeah,
even they would admit that there's an intense level of chaos here by
yeah,
design, which
yeah.
which leads to the question of, as a journalist, how do you cover on, because you got to localize this and this impacts people's lives.
Well,
How do you cover this?
um, well, carefully. Um, and I think the serious journalists, not folks who are tied up in propaganda or, you know, call themselves reporters but are really propagandists. I think honest, serious journalists would tell you cover it the same way you cover any other story. You try to, um, it sounds cliched, but pursue the truth, with facts and evidence, supported by documentation. Traditional reporting, the kind of reporting that, in my mind, you see the Associated Press do. I don't know if the president has referred to the AP as fake media, but I don't see too many people criticizing what they do. Um, and God bless them. I hope people are helping to support them. But it's yeah, you have to do it the same way, but you got to be really careful because in an effort to balance stories, you can legitimize illegitimate viewpoints. And I think this is something that journalists have been struggling with for 10 years now, since Trump first emerged as a political force. And yeah, it's really hard. It's just really difficult. And, journalists are talking to one another about how to do it, and uh, taking workshops and whatnot with experts, whoever is an expert in this. I don't know, but yeah, it's really hard. It's very difficult. The one thing I would say, though, about the atmosphere is, as I said earlier, I think it's really very different up here where we are than it is certainly in, what I guess now it referred to red states as if they're a different country. It's crazy. It's hard to explain.
It's startling. Last week I was in Florida for a couple of days and then New York City for a couple of days. And
Yeah,
you want to talk about a contrast in reaction from people on the ground to what's happening.
yeah,
It is
yep,
an illustration of our times. Well, John,
yep.
you're doing amazing work as always. Your
Oh,
story,
thanks.
front page story of this week's edition of Newport This Week. It's a must read, and it's we're fortunate to have you and an institution like Newport This Week, which of course I'm hired to do this podcast for and a contributor for. So it's a little bit self propagating to say this, but we're fortunate to have news available to folks to know what's happening there, to bring them closer to their world. So thank you for that. It's not easy right now.
Well, thank you. No, it's not, but it's encouraging to me that people in the community have shown so much support for the newspaper, um, which is 50 years old.
Yeah.
And that in itself is pretty amazing. And I hope that support continues because I think there are a lot of people, everywhere in the country, but especially up this way, who really want to stay informed and are trying to shut out all the noise, and a sort of temperate print outlet like Newport This Week can help with that. So thanks
Couldn't
for
agree
what
more.
you're doing too.
Thank you.
And I just want to say that I have listened to the program that you work on, um, and it's refreshing to hear a voice coming out of the radio that isn't angry and wacky, because so much of talk radio is just like over the top, off the right edge, and it's crazy.
Yeah,
So,
it's actually dangerous and part of
yeah, it has been. It has been. Uh, we can thank our friend Mr. Limbaugh and some other crazies for that. But now I'm going to get in trouble for calling Rush Limbaugh crazy.
Here we go. Look out. They send your letters to
Yeah.
Newport This Week.
Yep.
They will be thoroughly read, I'm sure.
Yep.
John, thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you.